Hey YouTube, welcome back to that show where you listen to the random guy talk about magic on the internet. Uh, for this episode, I want to talk to you guys about my 10 favorite new cards from the MTG Foundation set that is coming out pretty soon as of the recording of this video. A couple notes about this set just before we get into it. For those of you who aren't aware, it is a mix of a reprint set and a set of new cards. And kind of the gimmick or, I guess, special distinction about this set is it is designed to be legal and standard for at least 5 years, at least until 2029, when I guess they'll reevaluate and decide if they want to keep it legal. But the idea is that it's going to be the baseline or foundation, haha, of standard for the next long time. So with that in mind, I think that the design of this set, they definitely had to be a little bit more careful than usual in trying to like keep power levels in check and making sure that they don't print anything too broken that is going to have to be stuck in standard for a long time. Um, but with that being said, I still think there's some really cool and some really powerful cards in this set, and so I want to talk about 10 of them. If you're new to the channel or just kind of happened upon this, I mostly talk about evaluating cards from the perspective of a commander player, and that's what I'm going to be doing today, talking about cards that I like for commander. That's primarily what I like to play, but I'll also probably bring in some anecdotes about what I think they'll do in other formats, specifically standard, because that's the one that I have the most experience in aside from commander. So let's get into it. First card on my list is Abyssal Harvester. This is a 3 mana, 1 generic, 2 black for a demon warlock. It's a 3/2, and it has an activated ability that you can tap to exile target creature card from a graveyard that was put there this turn, and then create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a nightmare in addition to its other types, and then you exile all other nightmare tokens you control. It's worded like that so you can only have one copy of a thing that went into a graveyard at a time. Um, I just think that mostly I just think this card is pretty cool. First of all, look at that art. That is so metal, so badass. But also, I do think that it has some utility and could do some pretty cool stuff in Commander. For one, it just says target creature card from a graveyard that was put there this turn. So there's a lot of kind of intentional ambiguity in that clause because this can target creature cards that are put into your opponent's graveyards. It can target creature cards that are put into your graveyard. And also, it's ambiguous about how they get into the graveyard. It can target cards that are killed, that are on the field that you destroy. It can also target creature cards that are discarded. And it can also target creature cards that are milled. So there's a lot of interesting, tricky stuff that you can do with this. And the fact that it only costs 3 mana, I think, is a nice baseline for it. Because, yes, you have to pay the 3 mana, get it down, and then wait a turn before you can actually tap it to do it. But once you sort of have that ability online and it's just sitting there waiting for something to go into a graveyard, it's going to be pretty easy to find a target for it. And you only paid 3 mana at that point for essentially a reanimation spell, which 3 mana for a reanimation is pretty good. It's no reanimate, but it's pretty good. So I like this card. I like it if you're doing discard stuff. I like it if you're doing mill stuff. Notably, it's a demon as well, which is cool. Probably more for standard applications, but if you watch my last video of top 10 Duskmourn cards, I was raving about how much I loved Unholy Annex as a commander card. Just so happens that it has also blown up in standard, but I still advocate that you should probably be running Unholy Annex in all of your commander decks because it's just basically a strictly better Phyrexian Arena, which is already a pretty playable commander card. So notably, this is a demon, which meets the clause of Unholy Annex, meaning instead of you losing the 2 life for every card you draw, you gain 2 life and your opponents lose the 2 life. So that's cool in commander, also pretty cool in standard. We'll see if it's strong enough to get there in standard. But yeah, I like this card. Okay, moving on to the next one. It is another 3-drop creature. This one is Scrawlingtler, 3 mana, 3 generic for an artifact creature, Phyrexian construct. Cool. That art is really cool too. At the beginning of your... Oh, sorry, it's a 3 mana 3/2. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card. And whenever an opponent draws a card, that player loses 1 life. I'm not saying this is Shieldred the Apocalypse. I'm not going to say that. It is definitely not that card. However, I think punishing opponents for draw by having them lose life, even if it's just 1 life each time, is potentially a very strong way of keeping those greedy Rhystic Study or Wheels or I don't know, Brainstorm decks in check. I think this is a really cool way of doing that. Yes, it's going to draw your opponent's cards as well as drawing you cards, but what I really love about this, and I think what saves it and makes it actually fairly playable in Commander, is that, and potentially in other formats too, is that you don't draw the cards until the beginning of your upkeep. So if your opponents want to draw the cards off of it, they have to leave it alive until the play gets all the way back around to you, and then at that point, everybody gets to draw their cards. However, everybody's drawing an extra card, but you're untapping first. So you're actually going to be able to reap the benefits of having that extra card before anybody else does at the table. So I like that about it. I like that opponents are incentivized to leave it around. Sometimes with abilities like this, you give the opponents the extra cards first, and they draw the removal spell, and then they blow it up like Nekuzar or Howling Mine or something like that. And then they just blow it up before you get to draw your extra card, and that feels pretty bad. So I like that everybody gets to draw at the same time, and it's when you're untapping, so you actually get to use the card first. I also like the political implications of this. I think it's just inoffensive enough to not get people too angry at you for having them lose a couple of life every turn cycle, at least a couple of life. They're going to be thrilled that you're getting them extra cards. And so I think if you play it right, people are going to want to leave this thing around, and it's just going to be doing incremental damage over the course of the game, which will add up. So yeah, I think this card is really cool. You're getting to draw those extra cards. You're getting to use them before your opponents do. It's slowly ticking down their life totals, and it's pretty inconspicuous. So I like this one. I'm gonna play around with it and see how it does. I also like that you can play it in any deck. It's cool that it's colorless. So yeah, try this one out. I think it's pretty neat. Next one on the list, Crystal Barricade. This is 2 mana, so it's a generic and a white for a 0/4 artifact creature wall. It's a defender. It says you have hexproof, and then it says prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to other creatures you control. This one might be more of a standard playable card, or potentially maybe a pioneer playable card than a commander card, but I really do like just a 2 mana 0/4 blocker that's gonna dissuade early game attacks, that just has the blanket you have hexproof. I think that there are more instances than are... I think having hexproof as a player matters more than you might think off the top of your head. Even in a commander game, there's a lot of target player discards, target player exiles their graveyard, target player sacrifices a creature. There's a lot of those kind of... Target player reveals their hand and you pick a card. There's a lot of those kind of abilities that this is just going to protect you from. And it's not going to be a nuisance to the point where your opponents are going to immediately want to remove it. They're just like, all right, I'm going to target another player, essentially. So I kind of like that political side of it. I like that it prevents non-combat damage that would be dealt to other creatures. If you're in some kind of like Boros deck and you're running the damage-based board wipes, obviously this is really cool. If you have this out and you play the Blasphemous Act, and then it'll still blow up the Crystal Barricade, but all the rest of your creatures are going to be immune to that Blasphemous Act. So I think there's something kind of neat to that. And there are a lot of decks that run Blasphemous Act as well, so just saying you're immune to your opponent's Blasphemous Act is also neat. Again, I don't think that this goes in a ton of commander decks, but I think it's worth playing around with, and I really like how just clean and easy to cast and how much it actually does for you. So yeah, I think this is a neat card. Moving on to the next one. This one is really cool. This is Spinner of Souls. This is a spider spirit creature, 3 mana for a 4/3 reach spider. That's just on its own, that's a pretty good body, honestly. 3 mana, 4/3 with reach. But it also has an ability that says whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you may reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card, put that card into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. That is really cool. That basically reads that whenever another one of your non-token creatures die, excluding this card, you draw a card. So it's already kind of an above rate body for a 3 mana 4/3 reach. If this draws you one card and replaces itself, I'd say it's worth it. I think it's a pretty good play at that point. If you can draw a couple of cards off of this, then you're doing pretty well for yourself. I like that it can block in the air really well. It's going to dissuade flyers from coming in at you because for 4 damage, 4 reach damage, you can block pretty well. And I like that it's kind of like almost like a green Midnight Reaper or a green Grim Haruspex type ability. The one downside is that it doesn't count itself when it dies, so generally your opponents are going to want to kill this first. But cool, they want to kill your 3-drop before they kill your big 6-drop or whatever, so it kind of like draws removal out towards something that's maybe a little bit less impactful than some of the other things you have on board. But yeah, if it does trigger, if some of your other creatures die, if you're sacrificing them or anything like that, and then you're just drawing into another creature off the top of your deck, this is sweet. It's card advantage, it replaces itself, it's a big body, it's kind of like a Midnight Reaper. I understand why they had to make it so that it doesn't count itself, because if it did count itself, you could do some weird combo stuff where you only have this and one other like creature that matters in your deck, and then this dies and then it goes and finds the other creature that you need. So it makes sense that they had to put that safety valve. It's kind of a bummer, but I think the big body on this spider sort of makes up for that downside to it, and it's just really sweet. I think that this could be played in a lot of green commander decks, and you're not going to feel bad playing it. Again, if you can just get one card off of it, you just got a 3 mana 4/3 reach that drew you a card. That's pretty good. So cool card. Let's move on to Kiora, another 3-drop. Look at me with all my 3-drop creatures over here. We got Kiora, the Rising Tide. This is 2 and a blue for a legendary Merfolk Noble. It's a 3/2 creature, and it says when Kiora enters, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. And then it has Threshold, which means if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, whenever this attacks, you get to make an 8/8 Scion of the Deep Octopus creature token. Is that legendary? You create Scion of the Deep, a legendary 8/8. Yes, it is a legendary. Okay. So yeah, this just on its base level is a pretty sweet ability. It's a 3 mana 3/2, which is just kind of an okay stat line. But it's going to come in and draw you 2 cards. Yes, you're going to have to then discard 2 cards, but you're digging 2 cards deep into your library, which is kind of sick on a body. And then if you're doing any kind of graveyard stuff, which hopefully you are if you're running this card, because the Threshold ability wants you to be doing graveyard stuff. But yeah, if you're doing any graveyard stuff, you just discard your 2 reanimation targets into your graveyard. You discard one of your flashback cards. You discard Deep Analysis or something like that into your graveyard. And then you're sort of mitigating the discard that you get off of this. It's clean. You know, it's simple, but just on the baseline, something that's a creature, it's going to come down and draw you two cards. And then, yes, you discard, but you get to sort of control and mitigate that downside by doing your graveyard stuff with it. Is pretty cool. And then, yeah, obviously on the off chance that you get to that Threshold ability and you get to attack with her and make an 8/8, that's awesome. That is so cool. Yeah, I'd say that mostly you're just going to be playing this in graveyard decks. I don't think it's going to see a lot of play outside of that, but I think in your graveyard decks, this is a really cool card to include. And yeah, that ability, draw 2, discard 2. There's a card, I think it's Frantic Study, Frantic Research. It's a 3-mana instant that lets you draw 2, discard 2, and then untap 3 lands. Obviously, this isn't as good as that because it doesn't untap the 3 lands, but there is some other upside that comes along with it. Anyways, I bring that up because that ability of drawing 2 and then getting to discard 2, I think plays a lot better than it reads. I think that getting those 2 cards off the top and then getting to choose which 2 out of your hand after you've drawn those 2 that you don't need or that you want to put into the graveyard is actually a pretty strong ability, even if it doesn't necessarily read so much like that. So yeah, don't overlook this one. This is a really powerful option for graveyard decks that are in blue. Might see some standard play too. It's hard to say, but 3 mana, 3/2, draw 2, discard 2, make a giant octopus. Cool. Love it. Let's go to the next one. You knew it had to be on here. Blasphemous Edict. This card is crazy. This is 3 generic, 2 black for a sorcery. However, it's really not, because you may pay black rather than pay the spell's mana cost if there are 13 or more creatures on the battlefield. And it says each player sacrifices 13 creatures of their choice. Glad you get to choose those 13 creatures that you sacrifice. I was just talking about Blasphemous Act in the Crystal Barrier, or Crystal Wall entry on this list. This is Black's version of that ability. But the Crystal Barrier is not going to protect you from this one. This is almost always, on pretty much any commander board, there's going to be 13 creatures across 4 different players. This is almost always 1 mana. Everybody sacrifices 13 creatures. And in case you need me to tell you that, that's pretty good. 1 mana, it's going to wipe the entire board. It's going to get around Hexproof. It's going to get around Indestructible. It's going to get around... I guess those are probably... It's going to get around Shroud. It doesn't care. You're going to sacrifice 13 creatures. And most of the time it's going to cost 1 mana. This is crazy. This is automatic staple in the format. Of all the cards on the list, this one is going to see the most play. I was tempted to not include it because I wanted to go with as many hipster picks as possible, but I gotta give the respect where this one is due. So, Blasphemous Edict, 1 mana, sacrifice 13 creatures. Prepare to see it all the time in Commander. Hopefully I can pick up mine for a reasonable price and put them in all my decks, because it's great. What do we got next? We have F Trickster. This one's pretty cool. This is a 3 and a blue, so 4 mana fairy wizard. It is a 4/2 with flash and flying, and it says you can cast spells as though they had flash. Sick. That is one thing, and this is sort of a sentiment I've heard from other folks discussing this foundation set. One thing that I really appreciate about it is the simplicity. And this is a really great example of that. 4 mana, 4/2, flash flying, other stuff has flash. It's slick, it's going to catch people by surprise, and it's going to do some pretty cool stuff in Commander. What is the Orrery? Is it Vidalcan Orrery, the 5 mana artifact? If I'm not mistaken, oh man, I should look this up actually before I talk. So let's look at Vidalcan Orrery. I don't think that this card has flash. No. Okay, so it does also cost 4 mana, but it doesn't itself have flash. So this card it's the same mana cost, and you have to be in blue. But the fact that you can flash this in, and then if you have more mana up, flash in other things afterwards to just completely ambush people out of nowhere is really cool. Really awesome option. Kind of going back to the playing better than it sounds on paper, giving stuff flash is so important. You can do some ridiculous things at ridiculous timings to get people out of nowhere. Flash blockers in, flash removal in, flash combos into play at instant speed. And this is going to enable all of that while itself being a flash creature. So, cool card. Be ready for it. If you see a bunch of untapped mana, you have to think, oh no, do they have the Trickster? So yeah, let's move on to the next one on the list. Oh, here we go. Okay. So the last 3 cards on my list are all 7 drops. So I am a Timmy at heart. I like big splashy spells. We got 7/7/7 coming up. And what better card to lead off the list of 7s than the Sire of 7 Deaths? People are talking about this one, and I think for good reason. First of all, look at that thing. It is so cool. It's just so badass. I've always loved the design of Eldrazi. I think they look really amazing. Especially the one, Kozilek's Brood, the ones with like the geometric things floating over their heads. It's just I think it's a really neat sort of like aesthetic design choice. So first of all, it looks great. But what does it do? It's a 7 mana, 7 colorless for an Eldrazi. There's going to be a lot of 7s involved. It's a 7/7. It has 7 keyword abilities. It has First Strike, Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, Lifelink, and Ward, pay 7 life. I'm pretty sure it has like 7 triangles floating over its head, has 7 different legs, it has 7 of those eyes on its head. So love the attention to detail on the art there. But yeah, this thing is a beast. It's huge. It does so much stuff. The immediate comparison that came to mind for me was Phyrexian Fleshgorger, which is another 7-drop with 7 power and lifelink that also has Ward, pay 7 life effectively. I've played around with that card in some of my commander decks, and it's never great. I will admit that. It's never felt like amazing. Sometimes you get it down, and then the board just gets wiped, and you're like, oh, the person didn't pay the ward cost because they didn't have to target it. They played their Blasphemous Edict, and I just had to sacrifice it. And that's not going to feel great. However, if you can stick this thing for a turn or two, it's going to create such a tempo swing for you. You're going to come in. Good luck trying to... good luck blocking this. It's going to decimate your entire army if for some reason some cheeky opponent tries to block it with all those abilities. If not, it's going to come in, chunk them for 7. You're going to gain 7 life. And then if they try to swords it, yeah, pay 7 more life. I'll gain 7 more life. So I love that. And I just think that it's a generically cool, big guy that can go in any deck, which I also appreciate. And I do have a colorless Eldrazi deck that I am going to try and find a slot for, provided I can find this for... not too much money. We're looking at pre-order prices right now, so I'm hoping that it comes down to a reasonable price point so I can put it in some of my decks, especially that colorless Eldrazi one. Sire of 7 Deaths, first of our 3 7s on the list. What's the next one going to be? It is Coma. We got another Coma. Don't worry, it's not as disgusting as the first Coma. The first Coma is just so gross. If you don't know what it is, go look it up on Scryfall. It's disgusting. I'm not going to say all the words on it because it has a lot of words on it. However, I will read the words for this one. This is 3 generic, 2 green, 2 blue for a legendary serpent. It is an 8/12. It has such a large butt. It can't be countered. It has trample and ward 4. Ward 4, that might as well say hexproof. And then it says, when Coma deals combat damage to a player, create 4 3/3 blue serpent creature tokens named Coma's Coil. So 7 mana, 8/12, can't be countered, it's coming down. Trample, ability that triggers when it deals damage, so the trample matters. Ward 4, good luck targeting it. 12 toughness. Good luck blocking and killing without death touch. And then when it connects, 4 3/3s. 12 worth of power off of one attack with this thing. And if it lives, God help the table, because 4 more 3/3s, it's just going to spiral out of control. So I like that this is kind of just the whole package. It protects itself in multiple ways. It's not getting countered. It's not going to be targeted. It facilitates itself getting through with that trample, and then having a huge amount of power and toughness. It's going to win in combat, and then when it does get through, it's going to make you a bunch of tokens. So yeah, it you know, it's not going to come down like a Traxa and immediately win you the game by drawing you a million cards. However, if it can live for a turn, if you can get through with it, it's going to start getting out of control, and it's going to help you to run away with the game. So I like it. I think it's like I wanted to say modest, but this is not a modest card. This is a very splashy, big, just explosive kind of card. I guess modest in the sense that it's not a Traxa. However, I think it's really cool. And people are going to win games of Magic with this card, so watch out for it. Maybe try playing it in your deck that has these colors, and see how it does for you. I'm definitely going to play around with it. I think it's really neat. But that brings us to the final card of my list of 10 cards, the final 7 drop. Have you guessed what it is? Maybe. It is Shandra Flameshaper. This is a Planeswalker. It is 5 mana and 2 red for a legendary Shandra Planeswalker. It's 7 mana. It comes down with 6 loyalty. So Chandra's loyal. Chandra's going to be loyal. Especially because she can +2 up to 8 loyalty. And you get to add 3 red mana and then exile the top 3 cards of your library. Pick one. You may play that card this turn. The other abilities are +1 to create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it gains haste, and at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice it. And then it has a -4, which you can immediately activate the turn it comes down to... Okay, sorry about that. So the -4 deals 8 damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers. So again, she can come down and activate that -4 immediately and pick off any potential threats that might threaten her loyalty afterwards. She's going to be left over with 2 loyalty after you use that -4. So if there are only a few other creatures on the board, you can just take those out of the picture and then leave her to sort of thrive in the now leftover empty board. But what I really like about this card is that +2 ability. I hear a lot of people talking about the +1, and yeah, it's cool if you already have something big down. But that's kind of asking a lot after just having cast a 7 mana Planeswalker. The -4 is cool because it can clean off the board, but that +2 is going to just reimburse you 3 of that 7 mana that you just spent to put her down. That's almost a 50% off reimbursement. It's 3 out of 4, so you're almost there. And then you look at the top 3 cards and you just get to cast one of them this turn. So if you hit it, you may play one of them this turn. So you could even play a land off of it if you wanted to. Or you could just pick a card that costs 3 or less mana and use the mana off of this to activate, to cast that card. So it's just doing a lot. I love that the +2 brings it up to 8 loyalty. That's going to be hard to contest, especially if you +2, get the 3 mana, hit a creature off of the top, and then just cast a creature to block. It kind of comes with its own blocker if you can find a small creature off of the top 3 cards with it. Or if you have a small creature in your hand that you can just play with the 3 mana. You don't have to use one of the 3 cards that you exiled, but it is just going to +2 to Pyretic Ritual. And it's better than Pyretic Ritual because you're not paying 2 mana for 3 mana. You're just getting 3 mana, provided that this is already down on the table. So I think that ability is really strong. Obviously, 7 mana is a lot for a Planeswalker, but she comes with a lot of loyalty too. and she's going to be drawing you cards. She's going to be making you mana to cast those cards, and she's also going to be able to basically remove anything that's threatening her if you need to do that, or anything that's threatening you as well. That -4 is nothing to sneeze at. And yeah, +1 is cool as well. If you already have a big scary creature on the board, you can use the +1. My bet is that that +1 is actually going to be one of the lesser used abilities for this card, but yeah, watch out for that +2. Mana and card draw, winning formula, especially in Commander. So yeah, that's my last pick for this list of top 10, what are we going to say? Top 10 Commander, top 10 new Commander cards from Foundations. That has a nice ring to it. We'll go with that one. So that's the last card on my list. Thanks for sticking around to the end here. And if you're new to the channel, something I like to do at the end of my videos is a quick little reading from this Oracle deck of Magic-themed divination cards that a friend gifted me a little while back. So let's just take a moment, center ourselves, bring ourselves into the present moment. Take a deep breath. I'm recording this video on Election Day in the States. People are flipping their shit. Everything's at a fever pitch right now. I hope you went out and voted. And also, I hope that you are taking care of yourself and that you are acknowledging that the world is always ending. It isn't just ending today. So, with that, let's take one card. From the deck. Let's see what we got here. So the card that we pulled is the Sacred Garden with Karametra. And I believe that Karametra is the god of harvest from Theros. You can see that she is looking very beautiful in this regal white robe with what looks like a halo framed around her head up there. And she is holding this bountiful cornucopia that is pouring its bounty down onto the earth. So, this feels like good news to me. Give you another minute to look at that art and take your own meaning from the symbolism. But I get bounty, I get nourishment, I get care, and I get hope from this one. So, yeah, take that with you into the world whenever you're watching this. Thanks for sticking around and listening to my nerdy ass talk about Magic cards. I hope to catch you in the next one. Take care, y'all.